Welcome to In the House. My name is Mark Shiver, and rolling along with interviews of Republican House members. Today, I'm excited that our guest is Representative Dudley Greene. He represents District 85, which is Avery, McDowell, and Mitchell counties. He serves as the Vice Chairman of the House Judiciary 2 and also the State Personnel Committees. And this is his first term in the North Carolina House. So Representative Greene, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I might also add that in a new term, our district has been expanded to represent Yancey County as well. That's going to be a new area for us. We're expanding into.
That's a lot of area.
Yes, sir. About 4 counties.
So I wanted to ask you, first of all, you have quite a history of law enforcement experience. You served as a sheriff and for a long time. Tell us what compelled you to want to serve in the North Carolina House of Representatives after doing all that law enforcement.
Well, thank you for the question. I'll tell people I failed retirement is what happened to me. No, actually, I feel like I've always had a heart for service and wanting a desire to try to do what I could for a community, and I did that. I feel like for 30 years through law enforcement. Last 10 years, I had served as sheriff, and I had retired from that, and really never thought about taking on this role in the General Assembly. It had been something that I hadn't really given a lot of thought to until my predecessor, Josh Dobson, announced he was no longer running for the seat and was, going to be seeking a term as the North Carolina Labor Commissioner.
Right.
And once that happened, there were several of my friends, past supporters, family members came to me and said, have you ever thought about doing that? And we feel like you could do a good job for us. The more I thought about it, I do have a background in public service. I have lived in at least 2 of the counties that I represent. I'm originally from Avery County, and I moved to McDowell County when I married a McDowell County girl and came to work down here. So I have a pretty good knowledge of the district and so forth. And I got to thinking, my kids are grown now. I've got some time on my hands. Maybe I've still got some use left in me, and maybe can still do some good. So the more I thought about it, and prayed about it, and talked to people about it, and they encouraged me to do it. And so, lo and behold, I filed, and the people of the district were good, saw fit to send me down there to represent them, and I felt certainly privileged to have that opportunity.
Well, I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad you're serving. There's got to be something that compels you, and maybe you said it as a heart for public service, but that's a long drive from where you live to come to Raleigh, and there's some long days and long nights, especially when you're trying to wind up a session, and that trip home is long. So is that just it? It's the heart for service, or is there something else that gets you starting that car, at 4 o'clock in the morning to come to Raleigh or whatever?
Well, I think that's it. I think it's a wanting to do something good for our state and our community if I can, and can contribute my part. And and if I've got a little bit of experience I can offer, particularly in the public safety arena, that's what I want to do. So,
well, in a previous life, I had a radio show, and one of my guests was the sheriff of Nash County. This was in 2017, I believe it was. And he made a statement to me in our interview that I found astounding. But he said that they had at least one person every week dying in Nash County from opioid use. And to me, that was kind of astounding, because you don't, if people get shot, you hear about that on the news. don't hear too much about people dying of opioid addiction, unless it's a large number. You know, this state has 3,000 deaths or whatever. But as the sheriff, which county were you?
McDowell County.
McDowell County. Did you see things like that, Representative Greene? Was there the opioid problem? Was it widespread when you were serving?
Yes, sir. I was seeing that before I left. You know, at one point in time, it was methamphetamine, and methamphetamine. There were a couple or 3 years there where in McDowell County, and it's not necessarily distinction that you necessarily want to have, but we had more meth labs in McDowell County than any other county in the state for 2 or 3 years running.
Wow.
And it took a kind of a collaborative effort between law enforcement, some legislation that came, and the courts to get involved with a number of initiatives to make a real impact on that. And we were able to, you know, bring those numbers down, not only in our county here, but statewide through, you know, it's a three-legged stool. You've got to have mental health and substance abuse treatment resources available. You've got to have law enforcement. You've got to have legislation to accompany it. All these things have got to kind of work together.
Yeah.
And I saw what an impact that you can have on an issue like that from that standpoint. We had done a lot to curb the methamphetamine, and the opioids were coming on as I was retiring, and we were seeing those issues. And I've seen some legislation, and I certainly am interested in promoting legislation that helps to stem that tide. A lot of that we have seen through the pharmaceutical reforms and so forth that have come, but so much of this now is the fentanyl that we're seeing in the heroin, is what I understand. And you know, so there has to be some work done there as well.
Well, I think you hit on a good piece of that three-legged stool. Mental health issues, because there's something driving people to want to abuse these things. Like, I mean, fentanyl can kill you, from what I understand, and that's what's happening in a lot of cases. But folks need help, it looks like, and so I know that that's a big issue. And we didn't really get together today to talk about mental health and fentanyl and opioid abuse, but I was just curious, in your experience in law enforcement, about that. Now, you have been there, it's your first term, and it's difficult sometimes for a first term legislator, Republican or Democrat, to get legislation passed. But you've been effective in getting a few things done, one of which, Senate Bill 300, the Criminal Justice Reform Act, you were able to get an amendment inserted into that bill, which helps law enforcement officers. Tell us about that, sir.
Well, as we were talking before we actually started the taping, you know, one of the things I guess I had on my mind at the time that I came down there was, you know, there was efforts that you were seeing to defund police, and there was a lot of anti-law enforcement rhetoric out there in social media and so forth. And I came to Raleigh really concerned about what could I do to promote professionalism in law enforcement, to give law enforcement more resources that they needed out there to do their jobs effectively, and so forth. And I was encouraged to find when I got there that a lot of those efforts were already underway, and so we didn't have to start about reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
I know that Representative John Zoka had chaired a committee that were looking into a lot of these criminal justice reforms, and learned that Senator Danny Britt had put forward Senate Bill 300, which was a criminal justice reform bill.
Right.
there were a lot of provisions in that really served to promote professionalism in law enforcement, give law enforcement some additional tools that they needed, make law enforcement more professional. And one amendment or one little area there that I felt like that needed to be addressed was if an officer got a giglio letter, which just to educate a little bit about what that is, if a prosecutor feels like there's something in an officer's background that for whatever reason he doesn't want to use him as a witness, and really it's about truthfulness or has a bearing on an officer's truthfulness. If he just feels like an officer has an issue that he doesn't want to use them as a witness, he can basically have them served with a letter that says, we're not going to use you as a witness in any case ever. And it could effectively end an officer's career just by that virtue of that one decision that's made. But we were able to offer up an amendment that actually gave an officer at least a right to a hearing about that, if they were to at least allow them to explain, circumstances and so forth before it effectively, ended their effectiveness as a witness in any criminal case. And so I was proud to be able to do that, to give some officers some career protection out there.
Yeah, Representative Greene, does that happen often? I've never really been aware of that. Of course, I'm not in the, in the law enforcement arena, but
I don't know that it happens terribly often, but I have heard of cases where, that for whatever reason, a prosecutor just decided, I don't want to use this guy as a witness and he doesn't ever need to be testifying here. And if once he's issued that letter, then in that district especially, and that will follow him wherever he goes, that could effectively end in an officer's career. So,
yeah, no doubt.
So at least, this gives an officer an opportunity for a hearing about that before that's proceeded against him. So.
Let me ask you a question that might require a little bit of thought, but as you've been talking about law enforcement, I wanted to ask that, how do you feel about the state of law enforcement in North Carolina right now? There doesn't seem to be that same attitude of let's defund the police and all of that. Do you think law enforcement is in a good place, or is there some work that needs to be done with the image with the public?
I'm encouraged about what I've seen, where the needle has moved in the last couple of years. I always said that certainly law enforcement is something that we can always be improved upon. We can try to work towards making it more professional and so forth. But by and large, most officers, street officers and administrators were getting a raw deal. There are some bad actors out there in situations that needed to be addressed. Yeah. But most officers out there are good, responsible people who have a genuine desire to serve their community and help people.
Right.
And, I'm encouraged about the progress we've seen, but I still think we need to make efforts to see that they're supported and try to give them the tools they need and the training they need. If we can improve training and so forth, that's always a good thing.
Now, there were a couple of other bills that you had mentioned. Actually, right many, I was impressed at how effective you've been in your first term. But a couple of them were absorbed, or at least one was absorbed into the budget. I can't remember the number on that one, but tell us about that.
Okay, it was a provision in House Bill 561.
Right.
Which, coming from my experience with the sheriff, I know that our jail facilities are inspected by Department of Health and Human Services. And those rules are important out there. They try to make sure that all inmates are supervised properly and have proper medical care, and the facilities are adequate and space is adequate and staffing is adequate and those kind of things. but there are some provisions of that that are subject to interpretation, a lot of interpretation by an individual inspector. And there was really no recourse a sheriff had if he got a bad inspection report and disagreed with the inspector as to whether or not it met the code, or was this just the inspector's interpretation.
Right.
And some counties, it would put them at a potential for increased liability. Some counties had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to upgrade a particular part of their facility or a fixture, and only to be asked by the next inspector that came in, "Why'd you do that?" There was no reason to do that. And so, I was able to work in conjunction with the Sheriff's Association and put forth House Bill 561, which gave sheriffs an opportunity to appeal those inspection reports or have a hearing regarding those before they have to either make major changes to their operation or to, spend an exorbitant amount of money to try to make these things to satisfy an individual inspector.
Right. Well, that sounds like you've got your finger on the pulse of what's needed in a lot of areas that most people are not aware of in their everyday lives. And so that's good. And it sounds like you're being very effective as a member of the House. I wanted to ask you, when you come to Raleigh as a member of the legislature, a lot of things are already in place. For example, the Republican majority has been in place since 2011. And the way that they have crafted the budget and the tax reform and all of that has been in place. There's certainly a mindset of let's do this prudently. Let's not tax and spend and waste taxpayer money. When you came to Raleigh, was your mindset of how a state should be run financially, did it blend in with that, or did you have to change your way of thinking a little bit?
No, I think so. I'm pretty much a fiscal conservative.
Right.
Although I realize that conservative doesn't always mean you don't spend a penny. It can also mean making wise investments for the future. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I found that, there's a great number of people I came to work with that I've come to think the world of, and made a lot of friends. But I think the policies have been right and have put North Carolina on a great footing going forward. No matter what the national economy does, North Carolina is in better shape than probably any state or most states in the union to weather a storm if we have to. And I did have, my career was 30 years in law enforcement, but my background, I was raised in a small business family. And not only that, it was in an agribusiness that I was raised in. My family operated a nursery business in Avery County.
Wow.
And so I have a lot of respect for the small businessman out there and the tax pressures they can be under and how that can affect their ability to operate and employ people and how it all works together. So, I came there not only looking to support law enforcement, but to support business and do all I could to promote a good environment for them. And I found that meshed very well with what I saw going on in Raleigh when I got there, and I was happy to lend my support to a lot of those initiatives.
Well, trying to stay faithful to my time, they've been yelling at me because I've been going way over, but I just enjoy these interviews so much, and what you guys in the North Carolina House have been bringing to these interviews is, I find, very helpful to people and very interesting. As you talk to folks that you represent in your district, are they worried about inflation? Are they?
Certainly. Yes, sir. I think that's front and foremost on a lot of people's minds, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Rightly so. And what can we do about workforce shortages and so forth? That's another big issue that I come across, particularly in talking with business people out there.
Well, some of this stuff might be kind of frustrating. You know, inflation is not really a function of what you do as a member of the North Carolina legislature. It's a much broader economic phenomenon that has a lot to do with the federal government and stuff. But I was impressed that in the North Carolina budget that was passed in the short session, that you guys set money aside to deal with inflation. For example, if you're building a building and the cost of the materials goes up or the labor, there's money there to help pay for that. I thought that was very forward thinking and very prudent.
Yes, sir. And some of my colleagues down there and the staff, let me say that at the General Assembly, there's a wealth of knowledge down there. And, you know, and I've been amazed at the thought that goes into a lot of these measures. One thing that I will say, when I got down there, when I first came to the session down there, our economy was almost in a shutdown.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things, in addition to getting vaccines, make sure they're distributed to rural areas as well as in the urban areas and so forth, was trying to get that economy reopened responsibly. Mm-hmm. And I was pleased to see when I went down there that, you know, was a theme for our class and the session there was a lot of effort in the first part of last session to try to do that, and fortunately we were able to get that accomplished.
Yeah, we all are doing a good job. I think particularly you're doing a good job representing your constituents. Final question, do you hear a lot from your constituents, and how important is it to you to be able to help them when they call with a problem? Have you been able to help folks kind of navigate the bureaucracy that they face sometimes?
We get a lot of calls, people offering their their opinions on what they'd like to see passed as far as legislation, but more often than that is someone who is having trouble navigating the system as far as either their benefits, or they have a road issue, or they've had an issue with getting their driver's license renewed, or something like that. This day and time, a lot of these things are online, and you get people my age and older. A lot of times those online issues can be difficult for somebody to navigate, or maybe they don't have good broadband access and these things. So if we can help them, cut through some red tape and let them know how to navigate the system and how to, best address that, or get somebody at one of these state agencies in touch with them. And sometimes, there have been some legislative initiatives that have come along with that. We needed to change the law about some things. So yes, that is a very important part of our process. I was fortunate enough, my legislative assistant, my wife agreed to come along with me as a legislative assistant, and she was kind of reluctant at first about doing that. She said, I've never been in that. And I told her, I said, well, I understand that, but I don't think anybody's going to work harder for the citizens of the district than you would. And she does a great job at trying to help me navigate those issues for people.
Well, she absolutely does. And Representative Greene, you're doing a great job. I appreciate you being our guest today on In the House, and I look forward to maybe getting back together with you a little bit down the road and talking about some more of these issues. And I love the common sense that you bring to the legislature. It's refreshing.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And it's a privilege to serve, and I'm just honored to be a part of it.